अच्छा, go back and find out क्या किया है. Okay. At least this will give you a kind of framework what we are doing in the class. Okay. Many things are still to be done. Okay. So let us start. Okay, so we have already done number of principles including hierarchy, unity of command, unity of direction and purpose, span of control and principle of correspondence, okay, scalar chain, scalar process and whatever implications there might be of all these principles. Okay. So which of them do you find is the most important? Which one is inevitable out of these? Unity of command. If I say hierarchy, hierarchy includes everything. There is an obvious unity of command under hierarchy. Is it or not? There is an implied control, supervision, communication, everything under the hierarchy. So today our important principle is communication. Okay. So classical theorists give importance to communication, but okay, this is the fifth principle. Fifth, है ना? Okay. But their idea of communication was very simple. Okay. How do you understand the word communication? Are we having a communication? How? It is one way. So it is not a communication. Are you able to understand this one-way communication? Then it is a communication. So communication is not the sharing of information, it is sharing of understanding. So if I am able to convey what I have understood in PubAd, then it is a communication. But yes, the mode of communication is one way, but the understanding is not one way. Okay, so when we talk about communication, it is not merely a transmission of information from one place to another. Okay, because the information that has traveled must also create the consequence which the information desires to do. If that consequence is not created, then there is no communication. So information might have been shared, but not the communication. Okay. But in general sense, what we say communication is what? Communication is merely a transfer of information from one place to another. Maybe a transfer of an order, okay, or some directive given by the top to the bottom. So the classical theorists, okay, their view of communication is very narrow. Okay, they are assuming that communication is important, but the communication is what which is just the top down. Okay. So the boss will give the order, okay, and this order must travel to the bottom through obviously different levels. Okay. So these levels, whatever we talk about, the communication must travel here. So what will be the consequence? Whatever is desired here. Okay. Will this happen? It should happen, because everybody will follow the order. There is a subordination, there is a fear. Okay, there is a fear of punishment, so it has to happen. Okay. But what about these people? What they will do in this process? He will give the order or communicate. What they will do? See, it has to be implemented here. So what they will do in the process? Just transmit. They will add. You said yesterday we talked about such a strict hierarchy. So much of control is there. Command is so rigid. Okay, how they can change or add something? No, is there a scope in the structure for that? No. Theoretically, there is no scope for that in the structure. So what these people will do? These people are merely the means. They are not the contributors to that information. Okay. But yes, they must interpret the information. Okay, so what they will do? They will try to transmit the same information to the subordinates. But in the process, they will interpret it also. Okay. Now, how they can interpret it? based on their psychology, culture, belief system and so many things. So you see, the language of the information or the communication or the order is very important. Are you understanding this? If the language is vague, then the interpretation can be anything. If the language is very precise, factual, then the interpretation will not be vague. Okay. So language is a very important aspect. That is why most of the communication done in the hierarchical organization, okay, it uses a formal language which may not be understandable by a common man. Okay, it is not a layman's language. And why it is done? Because the language is important factor as far as understanding of the order is concerned. So, instead of leaving anything to the interpretation of the subordinates, the order is given in such a format, okay, that this language is something what? It is the universal vocab, the organization. Everybody in the organization will interpret the word in the same manner. That means what? The organization has to clarify the meaning of every word which is used within the communication, and this information must be available to everyone. Okay, when you will go to the Labasna, okay, you will be handed over a small, something like a dictionary. Okay, it will have the terminology, official terminology is used in the administration with what is the specific meaning of that term. That means you do not have to interpret the term by yourself, neither you have to look for that in the dictionary. What meaning has been given to that term is already specified in that dictionary. Okay, it is like a converter also from English to Hindi, Hindi to English. Okay, so you keep it with yourself whenever you do initially 4 or 5 years of your service. Whenever you are doing the official communication, you use that as the guideline. Okay. Are you understanding this point? So the language has to be highly formal. Okay, and it is complicated in nature. Why? Because it does not leave anything to interpretation. Okay, that is why you will find that how the official communication is written. Have you seen any order, government order? How it is written? Purely official communication. Okay, we thereby wish to inform you this. No, nobody understands. Okay, so it is like a particular term has been used by a theorist. Okay. Okay, he is saying that the official communication which is conducted in hierarchical organization is like Google-die-Gook. Google-die-Gook is the complicated terminology used which is not understandable by a layman. Now you see, these people here, at least they may be qualified. But what about people here? So what they do? Nothing. Simply the superior tells them this has to be done and they do it. They even don't read the communication because it is useless for them. So it is neither simplified for them. Okay, it is transmitted and they are totally dependent on the superior for what is the meaning of this order. Okay, a normal sub-inspector or a constable is not able to understand what is the IT Act and what is the terminology used in the IT Act. Okay, and what the department wishes by implementing this Information Technology Act. So it is interpreted by generally the middle levels and they convey them, okay, what is to be done, what is not to be done, or a simplified version is created for them. But they are not able to understand this communication. Okay, so this formal language or the formal mode of communication which is used in the hierarchical organization is itself a barrier in the understanding of what is to be done. Another reason for the drawbacks or the limitations of hierarchical system. Okay, but let us not explore first the disadvantages. So it has been referred to as Google-die-Gook. Okay, this type of communication we call as the formal vertical communication. So they emphasized on the communication, but for them the communication was merely a tool of control. They never gave a liberal interpretation to the word communication. They never gave a progressive meaning to the term communication. For them, communication was a highly restricted term to be used only in a particular sense, and what is that sense is the control. The more control you need to exercise, the more formal the communication should be. So they talked about a vertical communication. Vertical communication, that means in the form of the orders from the top, okay, and from the bottom it will be the reporting. If you remember PostCorp, it is also talking about reporting. Okay. So the communication will be totally top down, vertical in nature, orders coming from the top, and what action has been taken, the reporting going from the down. That means what? The people here nowhere participate in this communication process. They merely follow the communication. But obviously communication does not have only this purpose. Okay. Now why this happens? Because there is a unity of command. Okay, and the structure is highly controlled. Also, okay, if they create any scope for the contribution of these people, what will happen? The power and authority structure has to be transformed. Okay. The moment they start contributing, okay, they will change the nature of orders. Okay. So control will be reduced. Now their entire purpose is what? That we want rationality. So the moment they are giving the leverage or the scope of the increasing the scope of the middle and the lower levels in the communication process, what is happening? The rationality may suffer. So they never wanted to reduce the rationality, and that is why they went, or they accepted only one mode of communication, that is the vertical mode of communication. Now this has advantages as well as disadvantages. Okay, write few things. Okay. Communication has been considered as an important principle of organization, though its traditional interpretation is highly restricted. Traditional interpretation is highly restricted and narrow. There is excessive reliance on written and formal communication, because see, oral and verbal communication will have no meaning. When it is formal, it has to be written. Okay. Written and formal communication where the orders are transmitted. Orders are transmitted from the top and executed at the bottom. Executed at the bottom. Also, as a consequence, the bottom to top communication is also, as a consequence, the bottom to top communication is only in the form of reporting. In nutshell, the traditional model of communication can be defined as ABC, you can write defined as hierarchical top to down formal and written that is procedural control oriented non-humanistic does not allow participation or dissent. E follows strictly the chain of command. Chain of command, that is, no level is bypassed under any circumstance. So it follows this chain of command. This chain of command must not be broken. Okay. Even if there is an emergency, okay, the communication will travel all these levels and there is no possibility whatsoever of violating this chain. Okay. So what will happen? Again the same problem. The moment the communication arrives at the bottom, okay, that very moment the nature of problem might have changed. Okay, there is no possibility as to him directly communicating with him or him reporting directly to him. So this chain of command is crucial to the understanding of the mode of communication which is there in the hierarchical organization. Okay. What are the advantages?
The essence of the message doesn't get distorted because it's common.
Okay. The facts of the communication. Communication mostly factual, nothing left to implications. Interpretation, implication, everything is avoided. So you can say, okay, factual nature of information can be transmitted. Then, who has all the knowledge here in this system? The top level. But technically, he is the one who is communicating. The entire information resides in him. He is the most informed. Okay. So what does it do when the information resides at one place? So your control and supervision is very high. Monitoring efficiency might increase. Okay, because it is centralized. Okay. Okay, right. Write certain, it's okay. You write certain advantages, then we'll discuss. Right. Advantages of hierarchical communication. Number one, efficiency and rationality. Efficiency and rationality. Second, efficiency and rationality first. Second, distortion of facts. Distortion of facts is not possible. So, less scope of communication lag. Less scope of communication lag. Third, ensures strict supervision, control, and monitoring. Fourth, easy to enforce responsibility and accountability. Enforce responsibility and accountability. Fifth, does not create a web of information network. Does not create a web of information network that is simple to understand the decisions and orders. Simple to understand the decisions and orders. The last point that we have written, what does it mean? It does not create a web of information network. What does it mean? If there will be number of contributors to the communication process, what will happen? A network will be created. It will be very difficult to understand the real nature or the real meaning of this network. What is the essence of the information? It may be lost. Okay. If the network is not well connected. Okay. So, gossips will come, various types of information will come, and it will be difficult to interpret which information is important and which is not. Okay. So, when many people will contribute, it will be difficult to rationalize the level of information that organization has. So, in that sense, it is very simple. We know information will travel from here, and this is what has to be done. Simply followed and left it to the superior to ensure what is to be done or not to be done. Fine. So, as the decision is restricted in the hands of few people, okay, it becomes simple to execute it. Are you understanding this? We have read about intuitionism. If we promote intuitionism, what will happen? Intuitionism at the street level bureaucracy. What will be the consequence? How will the department ensure that this is what is going to happen? So we cannot allow intuitionism at that level. Maybe at the higher levels we can allow because they are probably more informed and knowledgeable. Okay. But even there also we don't allow. Okay. Because the executive or the head wants a specific output and that output must be achieved. They do not consider the ecological factors, the socio-cultural factors, and that is why they do not want or they do not allow the interpretation of the communication. So if intuitionism is allowed, it will be against the very idea of hierarchical communication or rationality. Okay. So they don't allow this discretion. And it becomes simple for them to use it, execute it. Okay. Just like a guide. A ready-made guide is given to them, do this, do this, do this, finish. Fine. But there are numerous disadvantages of this. Okay. Now, see, let us explore a little bit. But this is hierarchical communication, this is their idea. Okay, but in general, this is not the communication. Okay. There is a very famous model. Okay, it is a simple model given by Shannon, Weaver and Tweed. So they are saying a very basic simple model of communication should be, okay, there is a sender, the sender wants to, you can write the information here also, it is same thing, okay, or here also. So he wants to send this information, so what he'll do in a particular way, he wants something to be done. So what he will do, he will encode it, okay, encode it and use a channel, okay, verbal or a language, a medium, okay, some means of communication. Okay. Then this channel must go to whom? Who has to receive the information. So this information will be again decoded, received by the receiver, the action would be taken by the receiver, whatever, and feedback to the sender. Now, if the feedback is what he wanted, okay, then the communication is fine. But if the feedback is not what he wanted, that means what? That here it was encoded properly, but here there is a distortion. So either a part of the information has leaked, okay, or it has not been understanding has been less, okay, maybe the language is not proper, maybe his ability is not in order to understand this information, right? So various types, filtering process, gossiping, various things can happen, okay. The channel of communication may not be rational enough to convey the information in the same sequence, in the same chronology, in the same format as was desired by this person. So they are giving this a basic model. Shannon, Weaver and Tweed. Okay. So you can draw this basic. Now this is according to them a basic format of communication which should happen. Okay, you can make it more aesthetic than me. So if the feedback is not there, then obviously the purpose of the communication does not gets fulfilled. So feedback is a very important aspect which is generally neglected in the hierarchical communication. Why? Because it is already a kind of controlled system. Okay. Huge subordination is there in the system. So what? The subordinates will send the information which is desired by the superior, not naturally which is the fact. Okay. So they don't send the facts, the real outcome. They will only send those things which the superior wants. Okay. So feedback is obviously not a very important factor in the hierarchical communication. But in general, without a feedback, no communication system can work. Okay. Now you see, if it goes on, so this becomes a kind of automatic process. The better the feedback, the better the encoding. Okay. So this will come in equilibrium after a point of time. Okay. Because if he understands the feedback well, then he will start encoding it in the manner in which the receiver wants to understand the information. Okay. But there the problem is the language, the format. Okay. The lower levels which are actually receiving the information, they are not tuned to understand it. Okay. Probably they are not that well read to understand the nuances of the information being shared by the top and the middle level. Understanding? So they gave this model. Now how communication is defined, okay, in general, not in the classical or traditional sense. Okay, we define communication as the shared understanding of shared purpose. Okay, right. Communication is a much broader term. Communication is a much broader term than merely an exchange of information. Is a much broader term than merely an exchange of information. It is defined as the shared understanding of the shared purpose. Shared understanding of the shared purpose. Okay. Shared understanding of the shared purpose, that is, the sender and the receiver must be at the same level of interaction. Must be at the same level. Level does not mean here hierarchy. Level is the understanding. Same level of interaction for the communication to be effective. Okay. In the broader sense, the communication is not understood merely as a tool of control, not merely as a tool of control, but a central factor in improving the overall efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency and effectiveness. It can lead to, number one, better coordination and cooperation. Better coordination and cooperation. Second, increasing superior subordinate interaction. Increasing superior subordinate interaction. Third, providing platform for increased participation of subordinates. And democratization of the organization. Subordinates and the democratization of the organization. Next, effective tool for employee motivation, subordinate motivation, you can write. Effective tool for subordinate motivation, comma, developing leadership abilities, comma, improving interpersonal relationships, and ensuring employee loyalty to the organization. Okay, next, most important. Increases the capability of organization. Increases the capability of organization to adapt in the changing environment. Adapt in the changing environment. Okay. So if you are manufacturing sweaters in summers, that means your information network is very weak. Okay. So as far as the private organization or public organization, whatever, okay, any political development is taking place, okay, and you are concerned with the beef ban, okay, if some other changes are taking place and you are happy with the demonetization you have done, okay, so obviously the government is not well informed. So if there is no communication between the organization and the outside environment, then the organization will fail to change according to the required circumstances. So now, in the broader interpretation, the communication is considered as the central factor, okay, which may lead to so many things. In the narrow interpretation, it was merely considered as an exchange of information. Okay. So there has been huge impact on the communication within the organization, okay, because of the impact of or because of the use of ICT. Okay, information communication technology has drastically changed the communication within the organization. Okay, there is an emerging field, or it is already emerged, okay, quite developed now. But when these theories were built, it was not that developed. Okay. So there is an emerging field of communication known as cybernetics. Have you heard of this? Study of communication. Related to what do we study? Models of communication, communication structure, network, what do we study? Okay, cybernetic word comes from the Greek word kybernetes. Okay. Which means steermanship or hellsmanship, not the hell, but the hellsmen, people who are like the head captains. Okay. So it comes from there, okay, which literally means that communication is the most crucial factor governing the change in the organization, the transformation or the development in the organization. So here communication is considered as not just a tool, but the entire process of the organization which leads the organization to any kind of reform or change. So cybernetics is that branch of study, okay, obviously of the management and the psychology both, okay, which includes the knowledge from various disciplines, okay, and tries to study the communication process within an organization or within any particular form of system, okay, and how this system can be improved. Use of technology, use of physics, use of biology, use of history, anthropology, various types of knowledge they use. Okay, basically technology. So how technology can change this process, how it can improve this process, and how this process is going to improve the functioning of the organization, that is cybernetics. Okay. And it has the most important ingredient as the feedback system. So when an organization, its process is studied and its process is improved to include the feedback of the organization from the environment, that is known as cybernetics. That how well informed an organization is with respect to its ecology or environment. Because that is only the only way of adaptation, there is no other way. Okay. So instead of focusing on internal structure and improving the structure, the cybernetics believes in improving the communication process. Even if hierarchy has to be dismantled and the organization survives the change, then the cybernetics will say, okay, remove the hierarchy. Remove the unity of command. Remove this. That means what? It studies the entire process and the process which needs to be there, which does not need to be there, okay, and how this can improve the overall survival of the organization or its adaptation to the changes. That is cybernetics. So cybernetics has emerged as a very important sub-discipline within the management, within the organizational behavior and so many other areas. It is helping ICT, e-governance, okay, everything is working on the cybernetic model. Fine. We'll study about it detailed, don't worry. But just for now, you understand the term that, okay, there has been an impact of the ICT and the cybernetics on the communication. Okay. So today communication is considered, okay, probably the most crucial factor in determining the success or failure of an organization, but that time it was not. Okay. That is only we need to know. So you write just few more lines. Okay. Take another paragraph and write the disadvantage of hierarchical communication is obvious. The disadvantage of hierarchical communication is obvious in its inability to adapt to to the changing circumstances. It is rigid and does not provide. It is rigid and does not provide any scope for creativity and innovation. Lack of internal democracy within the organization, leads to conflicts and distrust. What will happen if there is too much of conflict and distrust within the organization? Why there is distrust? Because nobody is allowed to speak. Nobody is allowed to vent his opinion. Okay. Even if the opinion is functional or contributory to the organization, it is not allowed. So what will happen? Humans are thinking beings or not? Okay, but what you are doing? You are actually controlling them, regulating them through a mold. So over the time, what will this will lead to? Frustration. Okay. There will be a hidden anger. There will be an unspent energy. So what will happen? The moment there is a crevice, there is some opportunity for the conflict, that very moment the conflict will emerge. Okay. Because it is a hidden energy. So somewhere it has to come out. Okay. So it is logical that if the organization provides the scope for democracy, internal democracy means what? Participation of people, dissent, their views regarding any possible changes, maybe improvements, okay, in the functioning of the organization, but it is not allowed. So if it allowed the internal democracy, then definitely the stability of the organization would be more. But what they assumed, that by eliminating these things, what we can do? We can make the organization more stable. Have you understood this? So it is already counterproductive to the stability, because lots of human bombs are there within the organization, waiting to be exploded someday. Okay. But they are thinking that, okay, yes, by controlling them, by crushing them, okay, it is possible for us to maintain a minimum amount of, or the amount of stability that we desire. है कि नहीं? गंदगी को कारपेट के नीचे डालने से गंदगी तो नहीं खत्म होगी घर से. That is what you do when your parents are coming. Okay. Short notice. Is it or not? Okay. So you try to make it as good as possible, or as good as perceivable. Okay. In a short span of time. तो आप क्या गंदगी को हटाते नहीं है, वहीं कहीं सजा देते हैं. ठीक है. फिर वो चले जाते हैं, फिर वो गंदगी वहीं रह जाती है. ठीक है. Same is here. So they don't solve the conflict. What they do? They crush the conflict. Okay, but conflict remains. So the logic is that communication could have brought about various changes if they had perceived communication in a broader sense, but they did not. Okay, because their purpose was different. Okay, the entire assumptions of the organization regarding the human beings, okay, everything was very different from what we are thinking today. Okay. So classical theorists, structural theorists, they believed that there can be an ultimate design, and we must find this design. Once we achieve, or once we discover this design, then we can achieve the ultimate rationality as far as the organization is concerned. So many people with this assumption and using these general principles, they try to develop various theories of organization. Okay. So we'll start with some contributors. Okay. Beginning from structural theorists or even though we can call them classical also. Okay. Obviously here classical would mean that these are the initial theories and these are the essential theories to understand how the nature of theories regarding the organization evolved. Okay. So they are obviously like the milestones of the theory building in the organization. Okay. Even though this person cannot be called as purely structural, but we are starting our theories of organization from him. Okay. We are still studying paradigm 2. You remember or not? So don't forget that. Okay. So this is basically your unit 2 which is being covered. Okay, that is why I gave the plan. Let's just go through it, what we are covering. Okay. So paradigm 2 is basically your unit 2, which is there in the syllabus. Okay. So we start from or with the Taylor, F.W. Taylor, though he cannot be called as structuralist in the same sense, okay, as the others, but still he is also a structuralist. So F.W. Taylor, okay, better known for his scientific management theory. Or Taylor's scientific management. Now, what do we mean by this scientific management? That means there would have been a non-scientific management, and that is why he was compelled to come up with a scientific management. So Taylor is obviously one of the initial contributors to the industrial development or the understanding of the industrialization process. Okay. Taylor was himself, you can call him as an engineer, but he was a diploma holder. Okay. Started as a mechanic. Okay, but we don't call them as mechanic, but as machinist, who basically operate machine. But from being a machinist, okay, he became the general manager of a steel company known as the Midwell Steel Company. Okay, so from the lowest to the highest level, he had seen the entire process of industrialization. Okay, at various levels, exercising power and authority, he understood that what is the nature of the functioning of an industrial organization. Okay, so based on his individual experience, okay, obviously he did not, we'll discuss, he did not go for any empirical research. Okay, but still his vast experience ranging from the lowest level employee to probably the highest level employee in a particular industry, okay, provided him the huge experience and vast amount of information regarding the functioning of organization. But what kind of organization it was? Industrial organization, a production system. Okay, so his range of knowledge obviously was restricted with respect to this sector, but not necessarily restricted with respect to the functioning of organization, because he occupied various positions within the organization. Have you understood this point or not? With respect to a specific sector of the industry, it was restricted, but not with respect to the process of the organization. Have you understood this? He occupied various posts, so he knew different nature of functions within the organization. Okay, but yes, his entire knowledge was restricted to a particular periphery, that was the steel sector or the industrial sector. Fine. So he desired for a scientific management. Okay, through his observation, he found out many things. That people, okay, do not have a scientific temper towards the work. Okay, most of the people engaged in the industrial process are doing things in an ad hoc manner. Okay, which he calls as the rules of thumb. Okay, people from engineering background must have heard about the rules of thumb. Okay, what is the rule of thumb? rules of thumb in chemical engineering, rules of thumb in mechanical engineering. What do you do when you have a tap leakage in your kitchen? What do? You repair it? Obviously you can't. Okay. It will take time. Okay. Instantly what do? You find an M seal, okay, or that tape, okay, or a polythene, okay. But somehow what you do? You restrict the leakage of water. Now who has told you that, okay, wrap a polythene? No, but this was not a knowledge you were born with. From somewhere you would have observed it. Okay. So it is your observation, okay, maybe not a direct transmission of knowledge from somebody, but an observation and common sense, both. Fine. So anything which is based on observation and common sense, which is not derived out of an empirical study, okay, which is not an outcome of a factual study, okay, that is known as a rule of thumb. We know that it will work, but it will not be a permanent solution. But it can work. Okay, coolant खत्म हो गया तो पानी डालते रहते हो ना कार में, ठीक है? But water is not the coolant. Water is the coolant, no doubt. But the engine is not designed for water as a coolant. Okay. So the logic is that we use so many things in our daily life which we know may not be the ultimate solution or is not the rational solution, but no doubt it is a solution which can serve the temporary purpose. Okay. So they are known as rules of thumb. चोट लग गया हल्दी का दूध पी लो, है कि नहीं भाई? आज तो एम्पिरिकल नॉलेज है, बट पहले एम्पिरिकल नॉलेज नहीं होगी, पहले रूल ऑफ थंब होगी. किसी को भी चोट लग गया, कुछ भी चोट लग गया, हल्दी का दूध पी लो, ठीक है? मानसिक चोट लगा तो भी हल्दी का दूध पी लो, ठीक है? So logic was that it became a kind of prescription that have turmeric in the milk and drink it, whatever happens to you. Okay. So it was like a common sense knowledge. Okay. But yes, it worked. Now these are the rules of thumb. So Taylor observed that many things in the industrial organization are being done on the basis of rules of thumb. There is no clear-cut demarcation of activities. There is no clear-cut demarcation of work. Okay. Neither there is responsibility and authority allocated at various levels in the organization. People do not have scientific means to evaluate the nature of work. So what he did? He observed it for probably 20 years. Okay. And there is a very famous anecdote, एक कहानी है, that Taylor was going somewhere. Okay, he has written in one of his books that he was going from his home to office. So there was an ironsmith. Ironsmith, you understand, I think. So the ironsmith used to unload the pig iron, okay, to be sent to some factory. So every day he used to send around 7 tons of pig iron to a particular industry. So Taylor observed him for 4 or 5 days. Okay, then went up to him and asked him that, okay, how much this raw material you send to the industry every day? So he says 7 tons. So he said, no, you have a huge reserve. Okay, can't you increase the quantity? He said, no, see, we are using the best men, we are using the best procedure. Okay, but our maximum load is 7 tons only. So Taylor said, okay, let me observe what you do. Okay, allow me to observe your procedure, then I will suggest some changes. So he observed it for 1 week. Based on his observation, he suggested certain changes, and he said what he has mentioned in his book, that within 10 days, the load increased, or the quantity of load increased from 7 tons to 42 tons by the changes which I told him. Okay. This is debatable because later there is a theorist known as Simon who is criticizing Taylor for this. That jungle mein more nacha kisne dekha bhai? Who knew that this was a reality? It is your perception and you might have written it. Okay. There is no factual basis of your claim. Okay. But Taylor claims that, okay, the moment I suggested him certain changes, okay, his efficiency became or changed almost how many times? 6 times. Okay. That is a huge increase in the efficiency. So he said, I suggested for some specific changes. Okay, the way they used to load and unload, the way they used to recover the raw material from the warehouse, something. The men they were using for transmitting this load to the truck and something. So he has written this in his book. Very famous book is there. 4 books he wrote. Okay, one of the famous book is The Art of Cutting Metals. Okay, Principles of Scientific Management, Art of Cutting Metals, and likewise. Okay, so he has claimed in his book that okay, through these suggestions, okay, he transformed the efficiency of that particular ironsmith. So he said, now I tried to apply this in the industries. Okay, so based on his experience and observation, what he did, he provided okay, certain principles which he called as the scientific management principles, which were an improvement over the non-scientific management principles used then by the industries. Okay. So based on certain assumptions, he claimed that these are scientific management. Okay. Now scientific management, what would be the meaning of this term scientific management? By the way we are managing, it is scientific. Okay. Now what is that scientific management? What is that scientific word? Whatever we are designing is based on what? Facts. Okay. Or empirical study, or it is rational in nature. Okay. So he's saying that okay, if we search for the scientific, if we have a scientific management, what does it mean? We have the ultimate truth of the industry. We will know what is the ultimate truth. That is the scientific management. So there is a non-scientific way, or there may be thousands and thousands of non-scientific ways of doing something, but there will be only one scientific way of doing it. Are you getting? No. Okay. He's saying what is scientific? The most rational. So obviously what is most rational would be only one. There may be thousands of other ways of doing certain things, but is the best way of doing thing or doing that particular thing would be only one. So what is the purpose of the scientific management? To find out that one best way of doing anything. Whatever you do, basically his reference is industrial process, but he is trying to understand that whatever we do, there will be various non-scientific ways and there will be one scientific way or the best way. So my purpose is to search for that scientific principle. Have you understood this much? Now see, okay, remove what specific things the Taylor said, just leave it for some time. Now imagine what is the philosophical aspect of Taylor. What are the ideological concerns of Taylor? That Taylor was searching for the best, the ideal. Okay. That means what? As a philosophy, Taylor was trying to develop what? What was the purpose of Taylor? Okay, idealism, but if we say what philosophically, what were his assumptions? Instead of taking Taylor simply as a person, if I take Taylor as a philosophy, then what is that philosophy? No, that's fine, one best way, but why don't you find any philosophy, hidden philosophy behind what he's saying? No. You think for a minute, it's okay. Any philosophical aspect visible in what Taylor is saying? As a theorist, as an individual.
So that it is totally fact-based?
No. What is the purpose as a theorist, as an individual? What purpose do we have? Now he's saying what? This scientific management means what? This scientific management, whatever techniques he talks about can be used for one particular industry. But the scientific management, the logic he's talking about can be used anywhere in the human life. Okay. So what he's trying to say the humanity can be improved. It's not just the industrial process. Okay. There is a non-scientific way of living and there is a scientific way of living. Which one is better? Obviously, it depends on person to person. Okay, but theoretically, scientific way of living or scientific way of human civilization is an improvement over non-scientific way of human civilization. Is it or not? So there are philosophical undercurrents also, that what humanity's progression is what? Towards the science, towards the logic, towards the rationality. So the moment we move towards the rationality and logic, there is a progression of human civilization. Okay, industry is just one of the symbolic references, okay, which we may use for Taylor. Okay. His context was industrial development, but his logic was not restricted only to the industrial development. And that is why the concept of Taylorism comes. Just like Wilson, okay, Taylor can also be considered as the pioneer of the rationalism or rationality in the organizational theories. So as Wilson talked about science of administration, he talks about science of management. So both are in that sense, one is father of public administration and one is father of scientific management. Industrial revolution, more guided by Taylor than by Wilson. Obviously Wilson was more concerned with the political context. Though Taylor was concerned with the economic context, but what he is saying is almost same as what Wilson is saying. Is it or not? Both are almost talking about the same thing. That what is the endeavor? What is the possibility of human transformation? The possibility is only through a science. Okay. So there is no other means of human transformation or civilizational progress unless there is a movement towards the science. ये समझ में आ रहा है कुछ? क्योंकि आगे और कॉम्प्लिकेट होगा. So the philosophical aspect of Taylor can be interpreted in various ways. Okay, many questions are asked on the philosophical aspect. Many questions are directly asked on the informational aspect of scientific management. क्या facts थे? ये facts थे. Okay, but that is not the target. Okay, but yes, to make it more simple, Taylor conceived of scientific management. Okay, and based on his idea of scientific management, that there will be one best way of doing certain things, he comes up with certain principles based on assumptions. Okay. Now Taylor is not following a specific methodology. Okay. Neither Taylor talks about positivism, but no doubt he was influenced by positivism. Okay. Taylor does not use a tool, a methodology to conduct a research. He never does it. Okay. But what Taylor is doing, he is observing. Okay. Observation itself is an empirical tool if the observation is of physical objects. Okay. If you observe that when the matchstick comes nearer to this table of wood, okay, it may burn, it may not burn, at least it may heat. The moment it reaches the calorific value, okay, it will burn. This is an observation. Okay, there might not be a specific theory behind it, but through an observation, when you are observing certain factual things, the observation may lead to actually a knowledge. Is it or not? That is how the natural principles were discovered. So what Taylor did not develop any methodology, neither he is doing an empirical research. Okay, neither he had a framework in which he wanted to analyze. Now what he was doing, he wanted to observe the day-to-day, and obviously there was another reason, lack of sophistication in the theory building. Okay, or you can say lack of sophistication as far as the scientific tools are concerned to be used in the social sciences. Okay, so those people were product of that time, 1900, 1910, scientific management came. Okay, so what he did, he tried to observe the industrial process where it was visible. Where it was visible? Where it was implemented. So to understand the facts, to observe the facts of the industrial process, he went to that part of the organization which was visible, and it was the lowest level of the organization, where the actual work was conducted. Okay, then only he can factually see what is happening and how this can be improved. So his focus, okay, was on the something known as the lowest level of the production, known as the shop floor level, where the actual industrial production takes place. That is known as the shop floor. Okay, have you heard of this term, shop floor? Okay, so there is a mechanized process, assembly line. Okay, assembly line सुना है? You might have seen the production process. तो assembly line होता है, bottle fit हुआ, फिर उसमें कुछ भरा गया, then again you go, then the cap was fitted on, then something. Oh, that is not, that is probably an assembly line. Okay. So he tried to observe that shop floor level, the actual place where the industrial production was taking place. Based on the observation of that shop floor level, that is the lowest level of the organization, he comes up with his idea of scientific management. That means what? The scientific management is restricted to actually the study of the lowest level of the organization. It did not study the organization as such. Are you understanding? So organization has various levels. Okay. Let us say we say managerial approach to study of organization. Now was Taylor using the managerial approach? No. Was he using the integral approach? No. So he was using what? Street level, yes, correct. He was basically observing the street level in the organization. The operative level of the organization, where basically the workers work. So he studied that aspect. Based on the actual production or the task or procedure of production, he comes up with his idea of the scientific management. Okay. So there were certain assumptions behind his principles. Okay. So when he started observing the work at the level of production or the shop floor, okay, he observed certain things or certain aspects of human behavior there. Okay, people criticized that Taylor did not have any idea of behavior, he was more concerned with the machines, procedures and production. Okay, but it is not true. Okay. Taylor understands, okay, Taylor tried to understand that why or what is the level of production right now in the industries in general and how this level of production can be increased. Okay, that was his target. That once I understand, once I achieve the scientific management or the procedures of scientific management, then I can increase, multiply the production to many times. What will happen if the production increases? The profit increases. Okay. But to increase the production within the stipulated time period, within the stipulated man hours, what do you require? Either an extraordinary machine. Okay, now it was not possible. It was the initial years of the industrial development. Every year new machines were not being made. Okay. So once you have settled the entire assembly, then what you can do? The efficiency of machine depends upon what? How it is used, correct? Okay. So saving the cost and time, that means what? Let's say the production capacity of a machine is something like 10,000 pieces per day, for example. Now it is producing at 6,000 pieces per day. So where is the flaw? In the machine or the way it is being used? So he's saying now it is the way it is being used. Who is using it? The human being. So he felt that it was because of the workers, the non-scientific nature of the effort which the workers were doing or making and non-scientific nature of knowledge which the managers had, that they could not optimally use the labor force. So to increase the optimum use of the labor force, obviously with the same machine, okay, the productivity can be increased to the maximum. Once the productivity increases, what will happen? Obviously the needs of the industrial society can be fulfilled. Secondly, the profit of the company will increase, the organization will increase. If the profit increases, the incentives and the salaries will increase. Now he's saying what? The nature of conflict will be eliminated from the organization. Now the owner is also benefiting, the worker is also benefiting, the customer is also benefiting, then where is the problem? Now this is the philosophy behind his logic. Okay, why? Because the initial phase of the industrial development was because of the growth of the Marxism, okay, or the criticism of the capitalist mode of production. Okay, there was emergence of number of dissenting voices against the capitalism, and one of the primary voice was the Marxist voice. So because of the Marxism or the prevalent communism, what happened? The trade unions, the shutdowns, the conflict between the workers and managements were common. So in one way you can also say that, okay, he was the supporter of the capitalist system, capitalist mode of production, and that is why he wanted to protect the legitimacy of the capitalist system. To do that, okay, to legitimize the capitalist mode of production, he came up with a solution that was the scientific management. That neither you will be at loss, neither they will be at loss, neither the citizen will be at loss. Now everybody win-win situation, everybody benefits through the scientific management. So there is no inherent conflict in the capitalist mode of production. Okay. Now what was the Marxist view? Okay. Let us deal with this, because unless we understand this, we cannot understand it. Okay. Because the growth of the scientific management or the Taylorism is considered to be synonymous to the growth of capitalism. Okay. Taylorism fostered the growth of capitalism. Okay. And Taylorism was such a big force, or scientific management was such a big development, that not only the capitalist countries or Western countries, but also the non-capitalist countries like USSR, okay, and other communist countries also borrowed the scientific management. Okay, even though ideologically it is against. Okay, so there is, or the Marxism or the growth of Marxist approach. Okay, it was one of the biggest threats to the industrial development. Okay, what is Marxism? Okay, Marxist approach or Marxism, communism, let us say. Look, and what is the logic? From where this logic comes? Okay, this approach obviously initiated by Karl Marx, but Karl Marx is not the only one. Okay, but Marx's contribution is phenomenal. Okay, because he tried to study the growth of capitalism in the historical perspective. That what were the factors that led to the rise of capitalism? Okay. So prior to that capitalism, there would have been then before that feudal system. Estates and so on, let us say. So what he is saying, before that, masters, slaves, okay. Before that, maybe some other system. Okay. If we go to the primary subsistence stage, okay, if we go back to the subsistence stage, then what? Then probably there is no conflict. Why? Because everybody is producing for their own need and consuming it. Okay. But as we move from the subsistence to the surplus, okay, then what happens? As we have the surplus, so what we'll do? We'll save it, okay, or we'll sell it. Okay. So having surplus, see, what I created, I consumed. So nothing is left. But what is surplus? The surplus creates the sense of ownership. Are you understanding? ठीक है, जिस पेन से लिख रहे हो वो तो ऑक्यूपाइड है, जो पेन यहाँ पे रखा हुआ अगर उसको कोई मांगता है तो फिर अब मेरा पेन है भाई, जिससे लिख रहे हो उससे तुम्हें अभी मतलब नहीं, क्योंकि वो तुम्हारा है ऑलरेडी. So the sense of ownership is where there is a surplus. So if you create a surplus, okay, it will result in trade, bargain, barter, whatever you say. Okay. Now as the surplus would result in some benefit, quid pro quo, okay, or obviously some other form of benefit rather than what you have. Okay. So slowly and slowly this surplus will increase. Okay. Or you'll try to increase the surplus because you may need something else which you don't have. But you can only get it, okay, when you produce more. So even if it is a barter system, okay, and you want the particular food item, okay, you want burgers for carrots. Okay, what you cannot make burgers, so what you'll do? You'll grow more carrots so that you can have more burgers. It's logical. So what happens? The production from subsistence to surplus. Okay. Now surplus increased. Okay. Bargain or barter, all this increased. Because of that, the concept of ownership increased. It became more entrenched. Okay. So to store that surplus or something else, what? They would have created structures. Imagine a small granary where he is keeping it. Okay. For that he has to occupy a land. Okay. For that, to occupy that land, he might have to fight or do something or extend the boundary. Okay. Then to protect that granary, he will have to claim his ownership and secure it and what. Now see, the concept of private property comes. Okay. But that time population would have been less and the resource would have been more. So the conflict was not imminent. But slowly and slowly what happened? When the population started increasing and the resources started becoming limited, then the ownership or the concept of ownership resulted in conflict. Somebody would have wanted more, everybody wanted more, so obviously not everyone can get more, so somebody will have to reconcile with the less. Okay, now the conflict increases. So he is tracing the growth of capitalism to that kind of historical developments or historical evolution, okay, which were a consequence of the concept of private property or ownership. So he is saying in the subsistence society there is no concept of ownership, there is no concept of surplus, there is no concept of private property, nobody is bothered about that. But as the resources starts getting less and more population and more need for surplus, now what happened? This created a tendency of conflict. And here you will see now the concept of power coming into picture. Okay. The concept of master, the concept of slave. Okay. The concept of exercise of that authority to increase more surplus or more ownership for oneself at the cost of the other. Okay, so he is tracing the evolution of capitalism. So he is saying as the private property concept increases, okay, the ideology of materialism comes into being. What is materialism? Correct? To acquire more material. Why? You don't need that much. But material is manifestation of the power in the society. Even the process of acquiring and ultimately the acquisition both. The more you acquire, the more powerful you become. Are you understanding this or not? So, your economic gain, your economic ownership of resource, okay, or your economic surplus is the indicator of your status in the society because of this concept of private property. The more you have, the bigger person you are. So Marx is using this logic. He is saying that as materialism increased, materialism means the economic status. Okay. The material status. Material does not mean only the property, but material means he is talking about various aspects which are economic in nature. Maybe money, maybe property, maybe ownership, maybe house. Okay. So he's saying as the economic status, he's saying that what is the difference between a feudal lord and a servant or a slave? What is the difference? But difference is what? Difference is in the material, nothing else. But what is the difference between, let's say, a collector and a common man? Difference of power. Fine. Okay. That can be acceptable, that okay, legitimate power acquired by him, so he is able to exercise. Okay. But what is the difference between a rich and a poor? Neither the legitimate power has been given to him, neither it may be a difference of intellect, okay, neither it may be difference in natural abilities or skill or something, but the difference is only between the material and non-material. One has material, one does not have material. So that is the only determining factor of his status in the society, okay, or his high status and the others low status. That is what Marx comes with. Okay. But Marx's interpretation, okay, should not be criticized that it was only economic, because those were the conditions, okay, in those societies which ultimately culminated into capitalism. So he was trying to study those conditions historically, that how it emerged. So as it was an economic system, so he was merely concerned with the economic system. Okay, but he realized slowly and slowly that it was the nature of the economic system which created the social system. Okay, that means the nature of the economic system, the status of the person economically in the society also determines his cultural and social status. Might not be true for the caste system, okay, but it was true for the Western societies. Okay. In the caste system, it might not have been true. Brahman always Garib. Okay, have you heard of Amir Brahman? Kabhi nahi. Garib Kisan, Garib Brahman, hamesha. Okay. But culturally they were superior. Economically they might have been inferior. Okay. Thakurs, both. Culturally also superior, economically also prosperous. Okay. But what his analysis is, okay, may be totally fitted in the Western society. Okay, so he is saying that whatever economic status you are enjoying, okay, that also determines your socio-cultural status. So if you have, your ownership is big, you have more material, then your status in the society is higher. Okay, this is known as the Marx concept of historical materialism, or as a process of study, it is also known as dialectical materialism. Okay, dialectical materialism, that the historical changes, economic changes, whatever has happened, it is basically a change due to two opposing forces. Dialectics is basically two opposing forces when they are acting against each other. Okay. So, obviously one may be minor force and one may be major force. Okay. So, saying there are two opposing forces. One can be called as synthesis thesis, and the other as the antithesis. When both these come into conflict, ultimately, okay, whatever product comes out, okay, that means there is a dominant force and there is a less dominant force. There is a dominant ideology and there is a less dominant ideology. There is a dominant group and there is a less dominant group, for example, you can understand that way. So there will be a perpetual conflict between them. Okay, why? Not necessarily resources, but obviously one is dominant, that means what? There is exploitation. So if there is exploitation, the conflict is inevitable. So he's saying these two will come into conflict. Ultimately, one may win over the other, but obviously there will be some changes brought about by the minority also. So he used the term synthesis. Let's say the conflict between let's say in India, for example, the zamidars, okay, and the tenant farmers. So there must be some conflict. Or the traditional Mughal structure and the British conflict. Ultimately, it will give way to a new system, which may be partly British and which may be partly Mughal. He is talking this as synthesis. So now something else will become dominant as a consequence of this conflict. Something else will emerge. Now when this will emerge, this will become dominant. It will become the thesis again. Okay. And some opposing forces will come up somewhere. Okay. Revolts, slowly and slowly. Ideologies which may be dormant, but they will come up. Okay. Once they become formidable enough, then what, they will again oppose this thesis. Okay. It will become the antithesis, again the conflict, again new synthesis. Now what does it mean? By this logic he is trying to explain that what we see today is the result of the evolution of this process coming from thousands of years, okay, historically, from this society. So this conflict is perpetual. Forms may be different. That is what he wants to indicate. So he is saying, as the capitalism is an outcome of this process, historical transformation, then the capitalism may not be devoid of exploitation. It is impossible. So here also there will be one dominant group and there will be one less dominant group. Okay, that is his logic, entire Marxist logic. So he comes with the idea that the capitalist system which has emerged as a consequence of these historical developments. Again, this capitalist system is a kind of economic system, and this economic system is what that governs the society. So this typical type of system, known as capitalism, it creates a society which has two classes. Okay, and this is the biggest contribution of Marx, the concept of class. Okay. Class might have been used, but class was never used as the way it was defined by Marx. In fact, you can say in the social sciences vocabulary, the word class is an outcome of the Marx only. So class as the term denoting the economic status. Class denoted the economic status. Okay. Or the social status which one enjoys because of his economic status. So the moment I say superior class, for example, I would mean that somebody who is economically prosperous. The moment I say inferior class, then I would mean what? Somebody who is economically inferior to him or less prosperous compared to him. So what he wanted to convey that the capitalist system, just like the other historical systems have evolved, and the basic difference between the one who was dominant and one who was less dominant, the basic difference was what? The material. The same way in the capitalist system, what is the basic difference? That is the material. So two classes emerge, one which has control over material, the other which does not have a control over material. One whose material status is strong, the other whose material status is weak. Okay, so he comes with the concept of class, and he says the capitalist system is divided into two classes. Class is an economic category. One class, which is the wealthy, which is the owner, okay, is the bourgeois class. The bourgeois class is wealthy, owners, and obviously in the capitalist system, the industrial process is the dominant process of the economic change or economic growth. So they are owners of what? They are the owners of industries. They are the owners of means of production. Land, labor, capital, not labor at least. So land, capital, technology, they are owned by them. Wealth, finance. So they are having control over means of production in a capitalist system. Okay. So there is one class which is wealthy. Most of the social classification or socio-cultural classification is based on this. Okay. If you have read about the Harappan civilization or Mohenjo-daro's the city structure, the urban structure which was there. Okay. So there was a lower city and there was an upper city. Okay, officials and the rulers, the wealthy merchants, okay, the lower city, the common man. Okay. So even if you talk about that civilization also, there would have been one dominant group and one less dominant. Any civilization you talk about. Okay, so his logic is totally correct. He's saying that okay, there, because the industrial process is dominant, okay, because of these two classes emerge, and these two classes transform the entire social structure. One who are the owners and the other who are the workers, be it any form. He may be a manager, but still he is a worker. Manager is not the owner, obviously. So he is saying, in the economic system, the dominant relations which emerge in the economic system, those relations are visible in the social system also. If you are the owner, then you are the superior citizen also, not necessarily only the owner. So आप भाई ओनर है, वेल्दी है, तो सोसाइटी में भी आपका नाम है. So socially also you are located at a higher level or hierarchy, okay, and economically also you are prosperous. So he's saying because of your economic prosperity, you are acquiring or you are having a higher social status. So two classes emerge, one having the higher social status and the determining factor is wealth. The other having the lower social status, the determining factor again is the lack of wealth. Okay. So one is bourgeois and the other is the proletariat. Proletariat is the working class. So the working class, okay, even though bourgeois' literal meaning would be managerial, literal meaning is managerial class, but it is not basically the managerial class, it is the owner. Okay, because that time it would not have been very pronounced that ownership and management are different. Okay, today we talk about owners, management, and then the employees and the workers. Okay, but that time the owner would have been the manager. Okay. So he says there is a working class and there is a bourgeois, and this capitalist or capitalism creates this relationship. Okay, so one has means of production, ownership of means of production, one puts his labor. Okay, and this economic status creates the relationship of production, ROP. So the relationship of production is a consequence of their economic status. Okay, one is ready to sell his labor and one can pay for that labor. So he says a relationship of production is created. Based on this, the social relationship is created. वो मालिक है तो अंदर भी मालिक है और बाहर भी मालिक है. Are you understanding this? So capitalism, okay, when the industrial revolution, okay, in US or in most of the Western countries emerged, okay, and it became so pronounced. Okay. So industrialization process was supported by everybody, more or less. Okay. But the emergence of the Marxism or the communism, okay, was one of the biggest ideological threats to the growth of capitalism. Okay. Most of the Europe, okay, even though it was capitalist, okay, but most of the Europe, the dominant countries like Germany, France, and even the Eastern Europe, okay, which was the socialist enclave, fascist Italy, what are these? They were basically autocratic regimes. Okay. But their purpose was what? Their purpose was to equalize the power in the society. Okay. But obviously not through, their means were not correct. Okay. So there was an emerging protest or there was an emerging criticism of the capitalist system, okay, which was growing very fast. So you can say Taylor emerged as one of the supporters of the capitalism or as one of the pacifiers. Okay, a kind of Brahmastra against the emerging notion of communism or Marxism. Okay. That is the logic of Taylorism. टेलर का लॉजिक अलग हो सकता है, लेकिन टेलरिज्म का लॉजिक क्या है? विच वॉज अ काउंटर थ्रेट टू द मार्क्सिज्म और द ग्रोइंग सोशलिज्म. Are you getting this point? Fine. So, Taylorism comes in this backdrop. And, okay, obviously to create or provide the legitimacy to the industrial process, to improve the productivity and efficiency, obviously that was also the purpose. And somewhere, okay, relate the industrial production or industrial efficiency to the human progress. The Taylorism or the idea of scientific management comes. So scientific management comes as a tool, as an inevitable framework, or you can say as an inevitable progression to protect the humanity or to fulfill the needs of the human civilization. That was the logic of Taylor. That it is not merely a tool and technique. It is basically a process of fulfilling the needs which the modern civilization demands. So my idea of scientific management is what? It is analogous to the human progress, human development, and also satisfying the needs and wants of the human beings. So once we have the scientific management, or once we achieve the principles of scientific management, all the problems of the humanity can be solved. Poverty, hunger, backwardness, exploitation, everything can be solved. Now see how the counter forces. Marx is saying that everything is a consequence of that. And Taylor is saying what? That everything can be eliminated once we have the industrialization based on the scientific management. Are you understanding this? So somewhere Taylorism and the Marxism, they were counter. Theoretically they were counter, or ideologically they were counter to each other, they were against each other. And it was correct. So Taylorism was the product of capitalism. Okay, a Marxism was a different. Have you understood this much or not? No. So, when the Marx defines this, so he is saying that capitalism is the cause for the exploitation of the worker by the bourgeois. Okay. Now you will wonder that what the government is doing here. Obviously there will be a political system also. There will be a political class, a monarch. Okay, but in the under the industrial revolution, the monarchies were obviously overthrown. The monarchical system could not run the industrial process. Okay, why? Why it could not govern? The traditional monarchies will not fit, are not compatible with the industrial development. Why?
Because their functions were only police and all this.
Okay. They will perform traditional functions, their knowledge base is highly restricted. Non-scientific nature of the monarchies. Simple answer. Theocratic nature of the monarchies. Religious and tradition dominance. So to embrace the scientific temper or industrial development, you need to have an open mind, a liberal mind. Okay, logic and reason. So logic and reason, where they will survive, where the nature of the governing system is also compatible with that. Are you understanding this? So industrial development necessarily would require a democracy. It is very obvious. Or at least a transition towards the democracy. Or even if it is a monarchy like UK, it must be a limited monarchy, only a symbolic monarchy. It cannot be a functional monarchy. Impossible. Okay. Either it can be a dictatorship, okay, or it should be a symbolic monarchy, or it may be a full-fledged democracy which will support the industrialization process. Okay. So Marx is saying that okay, there is inherent exploitation, and what is the state doing? Okay, the state or the government, you can understand that way. So the government is what? Government is simply watching it. Why? Because they are the ones who are enjoying the power in the society. From where the power is coming from? Because of the economic prosperity. So once they have the wealth, okay, they do not directly exercise the power, but because of the wealth and the higher status which they enjoy, they are able to manipulate those who are in the power. So according to Marx's conception, in a capitalist system or where there is a capitalist mode of production, okay, the capitalist or the owners of the industries or the industrial owners, what they do, they control the government. Okay. How they control the government? But government has to survive. Government needs budget. Even if the governments have to fight war, they need armor, they need, arms, ammunition, okay, and so many other things. Industrial development itself creates money. Okay, industrial development fulfills the needs of various government activities. It provides the infrastructure base for the government and so many things. So he's saying that they cannot survive. The state cannot survive without these capitalists. Okay. So a state, okay, instead of protecting these people against the wealthy, the state is basically being used by the wealthy to exploit them. So state is not free. State is captured by the elites. Who are the elites? The wealthy elites. That is the logic of Marx. As state is captured by the elites, whatever the elites want, okay, that is done by the state. Bureaucracy and state both, they are the puppets in the hands of the wealthy people. Now you can imagine that, okay, because of his analysis, what happened? Even the concept of the state was being questioned. Already in the capitalist system you will find, now see, if you do a logical analysis in a capitalist system or laissez-faire state, what is the state role? Minimum role. What is the significance of this minimum role? The state is not bothered about so many activities which are being performed by the market or by the economic system. State has nothing to do with the economic system. So state can make the labor laws, state can make the minimum wages act, state can make something, okay, trade union act, but what will happen? Ultimately all these laws will reflect what? The need of the wealthy class and not of the working class. Okay. Marx, by his analysis, he conveys that ultimately the entire society, entire political system, everything is captured by these wealthy people. Now under such a scenario you will find that 1900, okay, obviously the phase of industrial revolution was maturing, okay, but number of trade union conflicts or increased trade union conflicts even in US, okay, though it was highly capitalist in nature. Okay. Well, civil rights movement was also a part of that. Okay, most of the workers were coming from the black Americans, okay, Afro Americans, or the natives of West Indies or the East India, whatever. So most of the people were coming from there. They were part of the labor force. Okay, so it was one obviously a conflict between the wealthy and the labor class, and also a conflict because of the existent apartheid or the racial discrimination there. But this was leading to frequent industrial breakdowns, hartals, strikes, whatever we say. Okay. So because of that, you can say the Taylor scientific management became the boon or the tool for the promotion and protection of the industrial development. Most of the capitalists were preferring the growth of industrial or scientific management. Okay, because it could have benefited them. And in general, any capitalist system would prefer scientific management, rational production, efficiency and more productivity. Have you understood this context? Okay. So unless we know that why Taylorism as a philosophy was also equally important for capitalist societies, okay, because it was acting as a counter force to the growing Marxism and socialism. ठीक है, but Marx की पूरी कहानी सुन लो पहले. Okay. So he's saying that what this exploitation keeps going on, the state exploits, the bureaucracy exploits the common man, the society or the workers, labor class. Okay. Ultimately one day what will happen? The labor class, because the time will come, okay, when the antithesis will become strong. Okay. So they will understand that okay, they are more in number, their numerical strength is high, okay, and they are being exploited by the wealthy people. Because initially they cannot understand this exploitation or nature of exploitation because it was duly protected by the state. But today everybody is conscious about the security, about the Jawan on the LOC or the LAC. We are concerned with the Jawan. Okay. So sometimes we even forget calling our parents, but we are more concerned with what happened to the Jawan in the POK. Okay. Why this has happened? We are the same people, not much concerned. Okay. In fact, I studied 2 years in the army school. The moment I realized that okay, they will force me into the army, that very moment I left it. So why this growing consciousness? Who has created this consciousness? The state. Okay. So even if it's a democracy, the people, the popular sovereignty, the public opinion is creating the demand for a particular policy or a law. It is not true. The state is also creating the public opinion. Okay, state has huge apparatus. It can easily mold the public opinion. Okay. Now, because there is no strong public opinion, an absence of strong civil society, we exist as individuals, as groups, as religious entities, as caste entities, so it is very easy for us, or it is very easy for the state to manipulate us. Now see the logic. So what the state is doing here? Same thing which the Marxist is saying, that state creates a consciousness. Okay, this is right, this is wrong. This is good, this is bad. This is what is desirable, this is undesirable. So state creates this consciousness which he calls as the false class consciousness. What you should be, what they are. What is the best career, what they are pursuing. What is the best food, what they eat. What is the best dress that they wear? What is the best music that they listen? So what state is doing? State, he is saying, is perpetuating this, okay, promoting it, and somewhere it is pacifying the tendency of revolt. So state pacifies the revolt by creating this false class consciousness. What is desirable is what they are doing. Same thing we are doing today also. Who is our icon? Mark Zuckerberg. For what? For what? He studied in one of the best institutions of the world, created a technology and earning the money. People just simplified human life. इसके पहले कौन सा ऐसा मतलब खेत में मेहनत करनी पड़ती थी हमें before we had that Facebook or WhatsApp. What kind of effort we were doing? Okay, it was some extraordinary effort we were making, some manual labor we were doing. Okay. So the logic is what? Okay, they create a consciousness that it has made your life simple. Simple for what? What kind of simplification it has done? Okay, in fact it has complicated. Okay, so even if nothing happens, we still keep seeing the phone. Okay, keep charging it. There is no other purpose wherever we reach. Okay, yeah, airport, railway station. Okay, whether we sit in the airplane, the very moment we are looking at charger, kahan hai yaar? Anywhere, neighbor's house, relative's house, charger. What is that? So it is what? It is a consciousness which has been created that okay, it makes your life simple. Fine. He's saying the same thing. That what they do, they create a false class consciousness. Because of that, tendency of revolt is not there. But he's saying one day they will realize when the exploitation will become extreme. Okay, their identity will be in peril. Then that day they will realize that okay, they are something. Their numerical strength is more. So the antithesis will now control or try to dominate the thesis. Okay, so he's saying that day what will happen? Revolt will happen. So they will transform themselves from just being a class to a class with identity. So they will try to usurp their identity and a conflict will take place, and this conflict will not be easy. It will be a conflict of blood, okay, violence, because they have the state and the state will use repression. If the state will use repression, then it has to be tackled by violence. Okay, so he's saying ultimately now, once they realize that they have this potential, they will resort to this violence. Ultimately, the state, the bureaucracy, the bourgeois, everybody will be eliminated. Once they are eliminated, then he says, then there will be a classless society, a stateless society, a bureaucracy-less society, okay, a capitalist or the wealthy elite-less society. So ultimately, that the equality will come. Okay, that is the ideal socialism which he talks about. But this socialism transition is not easy, obviously. It is more of idealism. Okay. So Marx comes with his counter political idea, an alternative political idea of socialism. Not only political but politico-economic, both. So ownership of resources in the hands of everyone, communal ownership of resources, communal ownership of power, everything. So this Marxist view or communist view became so dominant that most of the industrial revolution or most of the countries undergoing industrial revolution, they are facing number of problems. So Taylor, you can say the background of the scientific management is that, not just the lack of industrial productivity. So Taylorism as an ideology counters the ideology of Marxism. Taylor's scientific principle obviously tries to improve the productivity of the industrial organizations. Have you understood this, man? Okay. So we can take a break. है ना? ज़्यादा दिमाग गर्म हो जाए तो फ्यूज भी हो सकता है. So let us take 10 minutes, 15 minutes break. It's okay. 2 o'clock again. We'll do this. Okay, let us write something about scientific management and tailor. Have you noted it down? No need of elaboration, only the reference. Okay, right, scientific management movement, give a heading. Scientific management movement and the contribution of Taylor. Right. Scientific management is treated separately as far as its contribution to the development of organizational theories is concerned. Okay. Though it is a traditional approach, it is very much classical also. To understand the emergence of the idea of scientific study of the work processes, in the industrial sector, Taylor's scientific management is a pioneer contribution. Taylor's scientific management is a pioneer contribution. That means what? It is classical. Whenever you will try to understand that how the emergence of scientific development started or the scientific study of the organization started, then you have to refer to Taylor. So he is very much classical. He is the basis, he is the foundation of the scientific development or scientific knowledge pursuit in the industrial sector. Okay. But at the same time, his assumptions were purely traditional in nature. It was very much what we have talked about. Okay, right. His underpinnings, likhiye. His underpinnings reflect a purely traditional structural orientation. He wanted to search for one best way influenced by positivism looking for a specific pattern of doing things doing things at the industrial operative level. That means what? He was looking for a pattern, he was looking for an arrangement, he was looking for a science, so he was very much traditional and classical or traditional and structuralist in nature. Okay, why structural? Because he was not looking for the entire structure of the organization, but he was after the structure of the scientific work or the working of the organization. How to develop a defined pattern of doing things scientifically, and that too at the operative level. So even he was not concerned with hierarchy, even though he was not concerned with communication or the other principles of structure, but still he was looking for a fixed pattern of doing things based on the science of management. That is why he was structuralist. Okay, that means what? He was again looking for a structure, but his structure or the way or the location of the structure was restricted to the lowest level of the organization. So he may not be a structural in the sense of Fayol, Gulick and Ervik, who are more concerned with the higher levels of the organization, but he was looking for a structure at the lowest level of the organization. Are you understanding this or not? Aya? बोले आया कि नहीं आया, तेज बोलो भैया. आया. So structural does not merely mean only about the structure, but yes, it is a designing process, and he wanted to design the work at the lowest level. Okay, now you write. Okay. Philosophically, take another paragraph. Philosophically, scientific management movement is associated with, philosophically, scientific management movement is associated with the growing influence of industrial revolution. Industrial revolution and the necessities to maintain and manage both, to maintain and manage this change. Industrialization was not a simple force. It was not a simple force. It was transforming the entire socio-economic fabric of the American society and elsewhere, wherever it was initiated. Was India industrialized at that time? Yes, it was. India was not industrialized. It was a it was like a warehouse of the industrial development in Europe. Okay, India was obviously not industrialized. Okay, but Europe was industrialized, and many other countries in Europe, they were almost industrialized. But wherever the industrialization was taking place, it was bringing this change. Okay, likhiye. Capitalist mode of production. Next slide. Capitalist mode of production also comes with its own comes with its own fallacies. Its own fallacies like the emergence of have you heard of the Novio rich class? What is a Novio rich class? Who are Novio rich? No. New rich class. Okay. Emergence of न्यू रिच, नए नए अमीर होते हैं ना कुछ लोग. नोवियो रिच क्लास, कॉमा, wealthy merchants, investors, and capitalists. In the bracket you can write industrial owners. Consequently, there is an emergence of the labor or working class. The labor or the working class. This impacts the nature of social relationships. This impacts the nature of social relationships. As perceived by, next line, as perceived by Marxists, that means not necessarily Marx, but people who are influenced by the Marxists and neo-Marxists. As perceived by Marxists and neo-Marxists, the capitalist system thrives on exploitation of poor by the rich. Thrives on the exploitation of poor by the rich. Or of the working class by the capitalist class. Due to emergence of Marxist ideology, the Industrial Revolution was experiencing productive hurdles in Europe as well as in US. Labor strikes, trade unionism, labor strikes, trade unionism, and management worker conflicts were common. Next line. It was coupled with high attrition rate, retrenchment, and high attrition rate, retrenchment, and or you can write politics of collective bargaining to simplify it. High attrition rate, retrenchment, and politics of collective bargaining. What is an attrition rate? How many workers leaving the job? Retrenchment, collective bargaining, again trade unions, various strikes, bandh, various means which they are using, plus, okay, they were also, what they were doing? One is bandh, hartal, strike, what is the other method? Violence. Okay. जिसको हम बोलते हैं हड़ताल इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम स्ट्राइक. बंद करना, लॉकआउट करना. ठीक है. सो प्रोडक्टिविटी वाज सफरिंग एज अ कॉन्सिक्वेंस ऑफ दिस परसीव, दो मार्क्सिस्ट परसीव्ड इट, बट in reality also it was happening. Okay, and it was the reality of the industrial revolution. So in such a backdrop now comes the Taylor. Thank you. Okay, next paragraph. So Taylorism was a product of Taylorism was a product of the heyday of industrial revolution. Heyday means peak, yeah, correct. The best phase. Okay. Heyday of industrial revolution. Okay. Okay, Taylor wanted to increase the overall industrial productivity. Taylor wanted to increase the overall industrial productivity through his scientific study of industrial process, and using this knowledge to develop the general principles of scientific management. His close scrutiny of the industrial activity at the operative or shop floor level provided him with great insights him with great insights into the traditional mode of production. Great insights into the traditional mode of production existent at that time. He understood that most of the work being performed, he understood that most of the work being performed is non-standardized. Just underline this word, is non-standardized. Non-standardized and is subject to human errors. Human errors. There was no mechanism of empirical study of the work, comma, its discrete aspects, and consequent reforms necessary. Okay, based on his experience and observation, of the industrial process, right from the level of machinist to the post of general manager. He understood the specialized nature of work necessary to improve the industrial productivity. He tried to look for the, within quotes you write, the one best way of managing the industrial organization. Though he was never concerned with the larger functions of the organization, his work was mostly confined to the operative level. Now you give a subheading, assumptions of Taylor behind scientific management. assumptions of Taylor behind scientific management. Number one, what is his assumption? That there is a science of management. Okay. So he made certain assumptions. That what should be the driving force, okay, or how to understand the knowledge with respect to the working of the industries. The guiding factor should be science and not the rules of thumb. So we must work or we must search for that science, okay, and we must leave all the rules of thumb or the day-to-day things which we are doing based on the ad hoc knowledge we have. So he's saying the search for the scientific management is what? Is based on what? One of the primary principles that we are in search for a science and not the rules of thumb. We do not want a temporary solution. We require that best approach to do anything. Okay, first, science, not rules of thumb. Second assumption. Maximum output in place of restricted output. Now see, this assumption was based on certain things. Okay. So within this you have to write why he wanted maximum output. Because that will create the benefit of all. That is what he understood. That okay, the inherent conflict between the management and the worker is what? The management wants more profit. So to earn more profit, the management will reduce the incentives and the salaries of the workers. The workers want more salary. If their salary is increased, the net profit of the management will reduce. So he's saying then what is the third way? What is the neutral way? What is the solution to this? Increase the productivity. They will also gain and they will have no problem in sharing this benefit with the workers. So he's saying it is a philosophy, it is not just a simple technique. Okay, that increasing productivity is ideologically what? Removing the conflict between the workers and management. So he's saying there is no inherent conflict. The conflict is only on the profit, okay, on the benefit of the worker and the manager. But what they assume that the management's benefit would be the loss of worker and the worker's benefit would be the loss of manager. So he's saying this logic or this idea must be eliminated. Okay. Right. Within this you write the maximum output in place of restricted output. Okay. While observing the nature of work, he came across, or Taylor, he मतलब ज़्यादा casual हो जाएगा. Taylor came across a phenomena of, what is very important, came across a phenomena of soldering. Okay. Somewhere ये भी लिखा होगा soldier, soldiering and soldering. Okay. But it is basically soldering or gold bricking. Soldering or gold bricking. लिखिए, अभी I'll tell you what it is. There were, or you can write, there were two types of soldering visible. one, natural, and the other systemic. One was the natural and the other was systemic. Okay. Now what is soldering? Soldering, he's saying, is the tendency of the humans to put less effort than they can actually do. And this tendency to reduce the effort, okay, increases when he is in the group. है कि नहीं? जब रिश्तेदार आते हैं तो तुम्हारे पास बहाना होता है नहीं पढ़ने का. Otherwise, they are never saying that you don't study. Okay. But you will say that, okay, he had come or she had come. Why? If they have come, they will do their own work. Okay. But you will associate your work with them unnecessarily. Okay. So the logic is what? That we find an excuse as human beings not to put effort. Okay. Or our primary tendency is what? To find comfort. Okay. Or first work for the comfort, and then possibly if whatever possible scope is there, then put an effort towards any hard work. Okay. So that is the logic what Taylor is saying. Taylor is saying that this soldering is visible. Okay. And it is inherent tendency of humans not to exert themselves beyond a point, even if they have the capability. That is soldering. So you cannot say that Taylor did not understand the human nature. He understood. Okay. But his assumption about human nature was negative. Okay. He could have said it the other way, that humans can excel if given the opportunity and environment. But what he is saying, that no, humans will always tend to reduce their productivity or their efficiency if they get a chance. Okay. So he brings this logic. He says, if given a chance, the moment they have a scope, the humans have the tendency to reduce their effort, and even though they might have the capability, they will not act. And this phenomena is inherent to human beings. It is natural to human beings. So it is a default built in the human system. Okay. So he's saying this natural soldering, the tendency of the humans not to exert beyond a point, even if he can, saying this is natural soldering. We have been wired this way. We have been created this way. That will go for comfort than for hard work. So he says that this natural soldering, this cannot be eliminated. Impossible. Because that is human nature. So you cannot eliminate it from the human nature, but this tendency becomes more prominent when he is working in the group. So he is saying this tendency of not working, okay, or deliberately a group creating a restriction on the capability of its members. Okay, that is the systemic soldering. Are you understanding this? So the moment four friends you will see somewhere, or they will see you, then they will deliberately call you, chal, kitna padega? है कि नहीं? उनका स्टेटमेंट नहीं होगा बेटा जा पढ़, but they will definitely say that कितना पढ़ेगा, छोड़ यार, कब से पढ़ रहा है? So logic is correct. He is saying that the moment people enter into a group, okay, the moment there is a union formation, the moment there is a collective system or collective group emerges in the organization, that very moment the tendency of not working increases. So every individual follows the group norms, the group creates the norms irrespective of the individual capability, and every individual actually follows it. So deliberately they will restrict the output, okay, because they don't want to exert. Why they don't want to exert? Because if they exert, then the company's expectation will increase. है कि नहीं? 10th में अगर 60 नंबर लाते तो बाप कभी नहीं बोलता भाई जाओ इंजीनियरिंग करो. फादर क्या बोलते हैं, इसके बस का नहीं है, छोड़ो. So if you had scored 40 marks, 45 marks, कभी नहीं बोलते IAS बनो, अरे यार कोई नौकरी करो जल्दी, ठीक है. So the moment you scored high or you were good in academics, that very moment father decided that okay, he will become this. I could not, so he will become. Now the legacy continues. Father gives 2 interviews, the son also gives 2 interviews, and now he is looking at the grandson. कि possible हो तो ये भी दे दे 2 interview. So logic is that the moment what we are talking about a group, or the moment we talk about a production system, that very moment, there is deliberate lowering of the expectation of the management by the worker. So he's saying even if the machine has the capability, the human behind the machine reduces his capability deliberately, and thereby reducing the capability of the machine also. By machine capability तो उतनी है factually, but the operational capacity of the machine reduces. Why? Because the humans deliberately reduce its capability. So he's saying nobody wants to work beyond the point, nobody wants to exert themselves, because ultimately this will raise the expectation, and in case, within those 8 hours, whatever the stipulated man hours are there, within that time, if he produces more, what he gets? Nothing. Because that work does not qualify for overtime. So he's saying there is no incentive, there is no reward, and that also creates the tendency of deliberately reducing the productivity. That why to work more within the same time if we can enjoy and work less, because we are not going to get anything or any benefit out of this work. So now see, his idea of soldering understands the human nature very well. In fact, we have talked about something informal organization. It is visible here, even though Taylor never talks about the informal organization, but his idea of systemic soldering manifest in the form of informal organization. That means there is some emotional or social or some link between the workers which binds them together. Obviously that link may not be only cultural, that link may not be economic, because none of them are benefiting actually out of that, but there will be some emotional or some other bond which would have created this systemic soldering. So even in under the scientific management, nobody can explicitly claim that Taylor understood the informal organization. Neither he talked about, but you can say he understood very well the nature or the role of the informal organization, even though he did not study them. He did not deal with them separately as far as the organization is concerned. But he understood very well the process of the informal organization, that how the fellow workers control themselves or each other. Are you understanding this? So he wanted to eliminate this soldering. I said how this soldering can be eliminated. Now this natural cannot be eliminated. But systemic soldering can be eliminated. How it can be eliminated? Scientifically manage the work, understand that how much work an individual can perform, measure the work, measure the productivity, and also reward them. So you see, the reward or the work reward or work incentive structure which developed in the industrial organization was the outcome of Taylor or Taylor's scientific management. Performance related incentive. Today we talk about that. So here it was output related incentive. So Taylor is saying that yes, if we develop a kind of system, incentive system, where every individual, if he produces more than a particular amount or quantity, then he will be rewarded. So he will be motivated to work during those 8 hours itself. So if somebody is producing more than, let's say, the benchmark being, let's say, 1,000 pieces per person, and he starts producing more than that, then he will be rewarded at the rate of per piece. So what Taylor is doing now? Taylor is breaking this emotional bond or the informal bond which exists at the workplace. Okay, and that is why we say Taylor was exploitative in or non-humanist in nature. Okay. Because those kind of social or emotional relations were considered to be threat to the industrial productivity, to the efficiency of the organization. So by creating an individual incentive system, individual incentive plan, Taylor what? Taylor actually broke, or Taylor restricted or eliminated the socio or emotional relationship which existed, okay, under the systemic soldering. Are you understanding this? So he talks about a piece rate system. Bring a piece rate system, pay people per piece, pay for their incentive, incentivize them for their work. So what will happen? Automatically they will be motivated by money. Once they will be motivated by money, okay, they will not listen to his fellow worker. So what? He created an individual competition amongst the workers. The competition to earn money. Understanding this? So individual competition created, okay, no more group effect. So ultimately he's saying what will happen? Now everybody through this competitive mode, okay, everybody will tend to increase or at least push the limit of his capability. So this will result in what? This will result in higher productivity for the organization. That higher productivity can be given back to them in terms of the incentives. Okay. Are you understanding this? So he brings his idea of piece rate system, okay, or performance related incentive, output related incentive, which is a very extraordinary system used today also. Okay, it was known as differential piece rate system. Differential, preferential, many terms are used for this, but it was technically a discrete and differential piece rate system. Okay. Why discrete? Because every aspect of the work would be analyzed, then it would be scientifically developed. Okay. People will be trained and now they will be asked to produce. Okay. So later we'll study what was the process of scientific management. Okay. So his basic assumption was that if the individual piece rate or individual incentive plan will be initiated, then the systemic soldering will break over the time. Productivity will increase. Okay, right. Soldering, natural and systemic. Okay, it is not systematic, it is systemic. Okay, right. Soldering is the tendency of human beings to avoid work for seeking comfort. Naturally, human beings do not want to exert themselves. Beyond a point. Even if they are capable. This is visible in the industries also. Where every worker would perform below the optimum. This natural tendency is known as natural soldering, which is intrinsic to human beings. On the other hand, phenomena of systemic soldering is more dominant. Systemic soldering is more dominant at the level of industrial workers. Systemic soldering is more dominant at the level of industrial workers, where through a common consensus, they deliberately set the limits of production, or to say underproduction. Well, it was not a limit of production, it is basically a limit of underproduction. Okay. This may be due to the allegiance of workers, loyalty of workers towards their group, born out of social and emotional ties, at the workplace. Even though Taylor nowhere mentions the term informal organizations, the systemic soldering is very much a consequence of the informal organization. Okay. According to Taylor, the systemic soldering can be eliminated. By a scientific assessment of work, understanding the contribution of each worker, obviously towards the work. Okay, you can write that also. Each worker towards the work process, and finally developing an individual incentive plan. And finally developing an individual incentive plan where workers would be paid beyond the normal for each additional unit of product. Each additional unit of product. So what you are saying, if we assess the work and the contribution of the worker and then develop an individual incentive plan, then ultimately what we can do? We can create the stake of the worker in the production. So you can assume that way also, that he was talking about what you talk today, what you call something as ESOPs. Have you heard of? Employee stock option. ESOPs. Nahin suna? Nobody has worked in the corporate. Employee stock option. Okay. So companies give a part of the incentive or the salary as ESOP. A part in cash, obviously, a part in kind as fringe benefits, and a part as ESOPs. That means an equity holdership in their company. So according to the market conditions, the amount changes, may increase over the time, no doubt. Obviously you will not join a company, you will not remain in a company which is going to be defunct. So it is quite logical that if you are staying in a company for a long period of time, obviously at least some progression of the company would also be taking place. So something like this, what he had visualized then, it was very crude, no doubt. But he assumed that there has to be a stake has to be created, and even if that stake is minimum. So he talks about the individual piece rate system. Now he is saying that for the normal production, which is the standardized, which is the average, because for that you need scientific assessment, that in 8 hours an average person of this much skill, how much he can produce? He can produce, let's say, 500 units. So that will be the normal. Little beyond the normal will be at a particular rate. Way beyond the normal at another particular rate. So he's saying for this what? You need to classify, understand the discrete aspect of work. So based on the fair day's wage, you understand what is a fair day's wage? भाई एक एवरेज 8 घंटा काम करने का कुछ तो पैसा मिलना चाहिए, ठीक है. नेचर ऑफ वर्क कॉम्प्लिकेटेड हो, सिंपल हो, वॉट एवर. सो देयर इज अ फेयर डेज वर्क, and a fair day's wage. So he's saying based on the fair day's wage, we'll standardize. Let's say we say in general 300 रुपए 300 rupees per day तो मिलना ही चाहिए. नरेगा है कि नहीं भाई? नरेगा is not on the nature of work. It is based on the fair day's wage. कि एक दिन 8 घंटे एक आदमी काम करता है तो उसको कितना पैसा मिलना चाहिए, at least how much money he should be paid. So same way he says, that a fair day's wage will be decided based on that the number of units that or normal number of units a person will produce, and beyond that now you start using the differential piece rate system. So this will help in what? Increasing the motivation of the worker. He would try to produce more to benefit himself, but ultimately it will benefit the organization. Now any additional unit he creates, he might get, let's say, 1 rupee, for example. The company might sell the product and get a profit of 10 rupees. Then how much company is sharing with the worker? 1 by 10 only. So Marx was right. That what Taylor was doing, through his scientific management approach or through his idea of win-win situation for everyone, was basically trying to pacify the tendency of revolt within the workers. Okay, but that is only a critical view of the Taylor. Right now we are concerned with the benefits of scientific management. Okay. So obviously it improved upon the industrial process. Okay, at least it provided the scope of the study of industrial process with a scientific viewpoint. Okay. And understanding the various types of industrial processes which were going on, whether steel, chemicals, whatever. Okay. So various books he wrote, those books contained, you can say, the specific sector-wise work processes and how to improve these work processes. Something as simple as measurement, okay, as simple as art of cutting metal. So in his work of art of cutting metal, okay, he is talking about various ways, okay, or various techniques through which you can improve the efficiency of doing small odd jobs or labor jobs which you are performing, some mechanical jobs. So as simple as that, okay, even something like erasing the blackboard. So he might tell, okay, these are the movements. This is not the way you should go and erase it. You should first walk few steps backwards, then take something right, and then go into. Now see, it is how organized. But at the same time, it is highly irritating. Okay, that was the logic of the scientific mind. He standardized each and every procedure which was there at the shop floor level. Okay. But it was not irritating. Why? Because that part of the work was purely mechanized already. Okay. The labor did not have, the worker did not have that much of creativity already. No scope for creativity. Okay. But even though human nature is not subject to that kind of discrete control, is not subject to that kind of micro control. That each and every aspect, acha, abhi breathe karo, abhi mat karo. Okay. So maybe he might have decided those things also. Then right now you have tea in this plate or in this cup, don't use the saucer, use this, so many things. Ultimately there were people who designed the work process like that. Gantt charts, PERT, CPM, many things have been designed now as a consequence of that. Have you understood this much? Okay, then be happy. Go home. Tomorrow we will continue with Taylor. Okay. So with Taylor, various other things will be studied. Okay, you see page number 5. Page number 5, second unit. First, second, third topic. This will cover the entire Taylor. Page number 5, unit 2, first 3 topics. See you tomorrow then. Systemic है, systematic नहीं है.